Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing great today. Welcome to our lovely presentation. I'm Rosie. I'm one of the co-founders and COO at Magical, a SaaS productivity startup that helps you automate mundane, soul-crushing tasks and save a whole bunch of time. And I'm joined here today with David from Greylock. David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm David Thacker from Greylock. I'm a partner there. Been there about 3 years. Focus on a number of different categories, including SaaS, marketplaces, and fintech. And Greylock has been an active investor in SaaS for quite a long time. We are in companies like Workday and Figma at the very early stages. So great to be here today.
Great, and we're here to talk to you today about unconventional ways to grow your user base. But first, let's keep it real. Everything that's on this slide is probably all the content that you've seen before. It's the myriad of information available on Substack and on LinkedIn that tells you all the unique ways that you can grow your business. And when you're reading all this content, it seems really easy, right? Very simple, quick, easy to follow. But the reality is, when you're actually in it, when you're in the grind and in the day-to-day, this is what it can actually feel like. The advice that I was given when I first started Magical was totally cliched, but 100% true. It's the pillars of an effective PLG SaaS business. Essentially, it's understanding your user pain point deeply. It's building a product in a huge market that addresses that user pain point and obsessing over that problem daily. And it's making it insanely easy to get started on your product so you can kickstart that flywheel. But the reality is that you can have all of the tenets of PLG in place, but what you hear from the market is crickets. Basically, if you build it, they won't necessarily come. And that was the story of Magical for a little while, but not for very long, because in as little as 2 years, we were able to grow our base from 0 to 500,000 users across 20,000 companies with close to no marketing spend. And we did that by thinking unconventionally. OK, so what does Magical do? Magical, in a nutshell, helps you eradicate manual ways of working. So if you find yourself typing the same message over and over again, or copying and pasting data into spreadsheets, or into databases, or into forms, Magical will automate those tasks for you directly in the browser. We're used by a myriad of different job functions. We have entrepreneurs, sales folks, support people, and many more that leverage us today. And it's very easy to get started. You literally go to the Chrome Web Store, download Magical, and get moving. But of course, our growth didn't come super easy. We had to take a lot of bets, so let's dive into it. So how Magical first started off, our first 1,000 users. To get to our first 100 users, we did what most founders do. We relied on our own internal networks of friends, of family, and colleagues. And the good thing is that they actually loved Magical so much that they started sharing it with their own colleagues and friends. And that's how we got to our first 1,000 users. But there is such a thing about 10xing your user base from 100 to 1,000. And as impressive as it is, it's not really worthy of being venture-backed. And so we knew we had to think a lot bigger. And so what did we do? We decided to set an audacious goal of growing to 100,000 users in as little as 3 months. And we thought to do this, we would need to think really out of the box. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. These are our 4 tricks to user acquisition. So let's jump into it. Trick number 1, acquire growth. So oftentimes when founders hear the word acquisition or M&A, they think that this is reserved for much larger companies, much more well-funded companies. Magical decided to take a bet on an acquisition right when we were in our seed stage. One of the many features of Magical is that you can automatically insert text anywhere on the web. So as an example, if you have an outreach message that you send over and over again, you can create a trigger for it. A trigger could be semicolon hi. And say if you are in LinkedIn Messenger or you're in Gmail and you type in semicolon hi, it'll automatically expand that prospect message. So we actually realized that there were a bunch of Chrome extensions that were built around this single feature alone that had tens of thousands of users. And so we tried to take our bet on an actual acquisition. And this is how we approached it. So first off, we made a list of potential targets, potential companies that we can actually go after. But we realized really quickly As a small team without any dedicated M&A resources and very little experience here, we would really need to leverage warm intros to have any sort of success if we were going to go after this. Warm intros, as you guys all know, work best in pretty much all aspects of life. And luckily for us, we were able to get a warm intro into one of our targets. And so step 2 was really focusing on relationship building. Oftentimes, founders are not willing to sell their business. They haven't even thought about it. And this isn't something that needs to be, that should be overlooked. We spent several weeks developing a relationship with this potential founder. And once we actually did that, we moved into diligence and negotiations. And again, something that shouldn't be overlooked. Also, the challenge is that oftentimes, startups don't have all the data that you would need to actually run like a really strong diligence cycle. So in our case, we were doing quite a bit of sleuthing because they didn't have Amplitude or Snowflake hooked up where they could send us information about these users. And so we were guessing in some ways on the quality of these users. But in the end, we actually trusted our guts. We went with it. And the impact was we got essentially well over tens of thousands of users overnight. And so key takeaways for this section, number 1, acquisitions are totally high risk, but they can be really high reward. 2 is, even if you're really early on, I'd encourage you to explore them. They're unconventional. 3, warm intros always work best, especially if you're a small team and you don't have dedicated M&A resources. And 4, never underestimate the effort. One thing I didn't speak to is actually the effort involved in folding in the asset. So we acquired it, but then there's effort involved in folding it in. And that effort comes from eng costs and EPD resources that are dedicated to this, actually even getting event data on the asset itself. And that actually derailed us in some ways for a few months from our product roadmap. All in, though, we felt like it was still worth it because it kickstarted some of our early user acquisition efforts.
And as an investor, I usually don't recommend to startups that they go out and acquire other companies because it's a very high-risk thing, even for bigger companies acquiring startups. But I think in this case, and I'm seeing this more and more just in the last few months, done really correctly and strategically and thoughtfully, this can be a great way to bootstrap growth. I mean, right now in this environment, there's a lot of seed-stage companies that may have some great teams, may have built a great product, may have gotten to a certain user scale that just aren't going to be able to raise a Series A. And so there are companies for sale right now at reasonable valuations for what you're getting in exchange for that. So as a mechanism to either acquire users and move them onto your platform, I've also seen companies leverage these strategic acquisitions to go into a new line of business. If you're going from a single product to multi-product, this can be a great way to bootstrap into it. And I've also seen companies use it as a cross-selling mechanism. So maybe acquire a different business with a set of customers or users, and then cross-sell your own solution into that base. If you think there's a really good fit. And so I think this can be a really clever way to generate growth. Now, Rosie, how did you think about this in terms of ROI? Because obviously, price goes into this, and you're thinking about the number of users you're going to bring on board. But walk me through how you thought about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not going to speak to the specific price of the asset, but I can speak into how we kind of backed into the math around it. And largely what we did was we started by looking at the entire install base of the asset. And what we did was we thought through what would be the actual CAC if we were going to go out and acquire those same set of users. And applying the CAC against the install base and then taking a bit of a haircut because, again, we didn't have all the data, all the diligence. We knew that some of these users might not be high quality. They might not be from high willingness to pay regions. Some of them might actually be dormant. So we did take a bit of a haircut. And what that actually led us to was a really healthy conversation with the founder of the asset in backing into a price, because now we demystified it. We weren't just pulling a number out of our head, and they weren't either. We were able to actually start with a conversation on very reasonably, this is how we actually calculated it. And for us, looking at it from a CAC perspective, what we came out with in the end was a CAC that was actually lower than had we gone out and acquired these users, actually fairly substantially lower. And that's how we kind of justified the ROI.
Great.
Any other questions, David?
Nope.
Cool. Let's keep it moving. So trick number 2 is around social proofing. OK, so at this point, we bought this asset. We folded it in. Everything's gravy. Not exactly. So the asset had roughly 50 reviews on the Google Chrome store, 3.5-star rating. Not terrible, but not stellar either. And we as a founding team really believed that social proofing, which I define as the signal that you provide to prospective users on the success and the efficacy of your app, could actually be a boost for organic user acquisition. And so what we did was we made another goal again, which was let's 10x the number of reviews, go from 50 to 500, and raise the rating of the app to about 4.5 stars from 3.5 as quickly as possible. And the way we went about doing this was both unscalable and scalable. So let's start with the unscalable mechanism first. What we decided to do, and at this point we had some event data coming in, was actually reach out to the top 500 users of the app. And these were, this is based on folks in the app that we knew were actively engaged, using the product really regularly, and probably willing to have a conversation. And what came out of a lot of these discussions was actually really great product insight. It helped actually influence some of our product roadmap because we were asking some questions around what they loved, what they didn't like, what they wanted to see improved. And they suddenly started to feel much more engaged because they felt like they were part of the discussion. And then asking them to actually like, hey, can you go onto the Google Chrome store, leave a review and rating for us, was a very simple ask that actually had a very high conversion. What we also did as a founding team really early on, and a few of us founders actually still do this today, is for every review on the Chrome Web Store, we actually responded and left a comment. We were engaging our user base. And oftentimes, even if a user left a poor review, because we were jumping on and responding so quickly, willing to jump on a call with them to help resolve their issue, which again is a huge win for us as well because it makes our product that much more better, they were willing to change their review from like a 1-star to a 5-star. Eventually, over time, we did make this scalable. So now if you ever leverage Magical, after a certain level of automations or actions that you take in the app, we will prompt you to leave a review for us. And we've seen the conversion from that, especially from engaged users, be fairly high. And so the impact of all of this was actually pretty extensive. So direct as a channel from Google Analytics, for those of you who are aware from it, is generally the traffic that comes in from our Chrome Web Store. And we've actually seen that boost up significantly over time. We now rank for keywords like productivity and automation within the Chrome Web Store. And we've been highlighted as a top productivity app, top work from home app. And today, Magical has over 3,000 reviews in the Chrome Web Store and close to a perfect 5-star rating. So key takeaways for this session, set an ambitious goal. That's really key. 2 is be relentless. Don't be scared to go at it unscalably. I think oftentimes we jump to the thing that is scalable and easy to automate, but I think there is something to be said about sending that personal message out to users and engaging in a discussion. And after you hit your goal, make it scalable. You'll figure out very quickly what works, then you can automate it.
Yeah, I've seen this with several other companies I work with. Your reviews in the app stores really matter. Having higher reviews going from a 4 to a 5 makes a big difference in terms of conversion rates. Having more users, more reviews makes a big difference in conversion rate. And this compounds on itself as you get more views, better reviews. What's great with the Chrome store is it shows you the number of users approximately. So greater than 300,000 users, people come to a store. If they're looking, especially across multiple options or multiple solutions, they're going to gravitate to whatever is the best rated and seems to be the biggest platform. Now Rosie, Chrome is a pretty incredible platform, and you're seeing more enterprises using it, but not everybody needs to have a Chrome extension. So are there other ways to leverage some of these techniques off of the app stores?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one that comes to mind that Magical has leveraged for sure is G2 Crowd. I think that's like a really popular one for, I assume everyone here is in SaaS, but that's a very popular one for SaaS. That said, it is much more geared towards buyers. I think if you're going after end users, a really easy thing to do here, if you don't have, the equivalent of like a Chrome Web Store where there is public-facing reviews, is actually just to take your category and Google it. Like if you're in the productivity category, top productivity apps, and ideally you want to get on those listicles. And we see this on LinkedIn as well too, where you have influencers that are often posting like, here are the top AI productivity apps, and Magical is often on that list. And in part, it's because organically we're getting on those lists, but we're also, in certain cases, reaching out to some of those influencers as well to actually get on them, because that also helps with organic user acquisition.
Great.
All right, so trick number 3, make your users your evangelists. This is a bit of a no-duh for PLG SaaS companies. Like we always talk about referral loops, and this is something that I think is almost table stakes. And it's something that even from the very beginning with Magical, we baked into our product. So if you leverage Magical today, you will see for every referral, we'll offer you credits, or you'll have access to new features. And that is a mechanism that works really well. But what we decided to do here when we were thinking about evangelism is kind of take it a step further and figure out other unique ways that we could really help add horsepower to this. And what we did was we actually decided to identify who we believed were our top evangelists and actually just start engaging in discussions with them. And so the way we did that was we used event data to figure out who was most active in the app, who was sharing, so we can often see how many share, like how many referrals they've actually made in app. And then, as some of you are aware, sometimes sharing doesn't even happen in an app. It happens at the water cooler or just through word of mouth. And so when we'd see a domain join Magical and we'd see really, really high growth, so it's going from like, say, 5 users to like 200 users in the series of like, several weeks or a few months, we would try to pinpoint who actually did the sharing by selecting maybe it was like the first or second user on the domain. And oftentimes that hypothesis was true, that first or second user was the one that was actually instigating most of the sharing. And we jump on calls with these users. And the most interesting questions that we would ask them is, one, how do apps like Magical spread in your organization? And two, what would help you share Magical more? And the very interesting thing that kind of came out of these discussions was, one, oftentimes they weren't actually even aware of all the features Magical had to offer. They were only using it for their singular use case. And that was actually limiting their ability to actually share the product. Because if they're only using it for a specific use case, they're only thinking from that tunnel vision of, oh, I think the rest of my customer support team could benefit from this, but maybe not necessarily sales. And when we opened their eyes to what the product could do, they were like, oh, actually, there's so many other teams that could benefit from this. And the other thing that we actually learned was there were actual forums where sharing was actually happening within their company. Oftentimes it was lunch and learns or trainings. And though they were bringing up Magical, they didn't really have any real materials to go out and pitch us to their company. And so what this led us to do was segment these users off, again, based on event data. And over time, we've used questions and onboarding to actually segment them off and have dedicated email drips for them where we give them training materials. We give them early access to new features. And all of this is to help spark some of that evangelism, again, coming out of those discussions. The other thing that we did was we really tried to make our power users, and actually all of our users, feel really, really special. And I think this is really important to promote evangelism in the app. So as an example, you'll see on the slide here, Magical Wrapped, and that was actually our take on the very popular Spotify Wrapped campaign. We did this for all of our users on International Achievers Day. Everyone got this email that basically showed them how productive they are relative to their peers. And our users loved it. They went off and shared it on social, and that led to more signups. Very similarly, one of the big value props of Magical is it helps you save a whole boatload of time. And we have these fun little quips in the app that'll actually show you, if you save 5 minutes, go on a walk. If you've saved, in this case, 36 hours, that's the entire Star Wars movie collection. And our users love it. They go off and they post it on social media. And again, it just drives further referrals into the app. And lastly, what we really try to do is nurture our users. Again, this is a little unscalable, but we almost have like a mini CRM of some of our power users, especially at some of our larger companies. And we engage them. We engage in discussions with them when we're rolling out new features. We actually even have like Slack groups in certain cases where we've experimented bringing them in and having these discussions. And the impact of all of this is that referrals still remains our #1 source of signups. And I would actually even argue that over time this has grown substantially as well too. And again, it's by going after this approach, which is on the next slide, of identifying our potential evangelists using some level of event data or heuristics, making them feel really special, thinking out of box. I think one of the things that we do here that's really fun is we ask the entire company for ideas on how we can make our users feel really special, and then we continue to nurture them over time.
And it's great to see this end user evangelism and this spread that happens within companies. But inevitably with product-led growth companies, especially in big enterprises, when you touch enough users, end users, it gets noticed usually by the IT department, or sometimes the CFO is wondering, why are these budget line items showing up? Can you talk about how you turn maybe like the IT administrator? I mean, have they contacted you? How do you turn them into an evangelist too?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. I think To be completely honest, Magical is sometimes, it's interesting. It's actually sometimes adopted wall to wall in organizations where we've seen even at like larger companies, it starts with one team, that team falls in love with it, they share it with another team, and it grows and grows and grows until we might be used by thousands of users in a company. And usually the first inbound contact that we actually get that's even interested in a pricing discussion is from IT, because they've found out that Magical is being used by a whole host of their employees, and they have security considerations or concerns with the product itself. And I'd say in large part, we've been proactive in certain ways of having, we now have like a trust center set up on our website that folks can access really easily, that we direct them to. We're currently undergoing SOC 2 certification as well too, which we know is going to meaningfully help. But in large part, I think because Magical has become almost like an essential tool in a lot of ways at companies, IT in some cases has just sort of turned a blind eye to us. So even though we don't fully fulfill the checklist, they're more than willing to actually work with us and cooperate with us because they know that there's going to be backlash from their teams if they don't. So I don't know if that's the best answer or that's what you've seen in your portfolio as well too. It's just kind of what's worked for Magical so far.
So they don't necessarily become evangelists, but they see the
Yes.
end user love, and they don't want to be the bad guy for turning that off.
That's exactly it. They're not necessarily evangelists, but they're not blockers either. They don't want to be the blocker. Cool. So this brings me to my last trick, which is experiment and microscale. So essentially, when we hit a couple of 100,000 users or so, we decided to bring on a head of marketing. And one of her many mandates was to identify opportunity size and experiment with a couple of different channels every quarter. And if the experiment actually worked, and by worked, we're seeing strong signal of signups, the CAC is at a reasonable level, she would go off and microscale it. And by microscale, that's kind of a coin that I termed. What I mean is we're not a large company by any means. We don't have infinite resources. And so when we think about scaling, we think about doing it at a micro level. And for me, what that means is developing a repeatable process and then augmenting resources on the team with lower cost resources, whether it be tech or people in lower cost regions, so that our team can really focus on their best work and the optimal work that'll actually drive signups for Magical. And so a really good example of this is actually TikTok. Magical actually appeals to a bit of a younger audience, like entry-level knowledge workers. And so, as a team, we actually thought that TikTok would be a really interesting channel for us to experiment with because oftentimes, young entry-level knowledge workers or young entry-level people in general just live on TikTok. And so we thought this was a good idea, or naturally, we could probably generate some buzz there. And so what we did was we ended up hiring a summer intern who joined us for roughly about 8 weeks. And her mandate was to post organic content on behalf of Magical, but also to source and go after influencers to post content on our behalf. So we ran the experiment over 8 weeks. Our marketing attribution was really poor at the time, and so oftentimes we were almost guesstimating the number of signups that we were getting from her own posts and then some of the influencer posts. And by guesstimating, truly speaking, we were looking at our baseline of installs that we would have expected to get on any given day based on the data that we had, and then any boost from the videos that she had posted where we saw some level of virality or like a high level of impressions. And guesstimating was totally fine because we needed some signal on what our CAC was. And so we were totally okay with not being precise here, but just kind of generally being within a range. And so coming out of this experiment, we actually found that TikTok worked. It was a meaningful channel for us. And so we decided to microscale it. So we hired a full-time influencer marketer. But what we also did was augment some of her time, some of the time that she would be spending on more manual work, with outside resources. So today she uses a VA firm to help her source influencers, which some of you might know that's very time consuming. She uses AI to help write content scripts for her. And she uses Upworkers to help polish her videos. Another really good example is our programmatic SEO pages. You'll see that on this slide too, labeled landing pages. Programmatic SEO, for those of you who aren't aware, are essentially SEO optimized landing pages that are based on a set of programmatic rules and usually have data derived from your DB. And for Magical, we actually thought this was a really compelling opportunity because we started seeing that our users were asking questions on like how to connect two apps together, which is one of the use cases of Magical. You can transfer data very easily between like an app like LinkedIn and Google Sheets. Our users were asking these questions, and oftentimes even in user interviews when we'd say, what are the things that you're Googling to actually even find apps like Magical, it was connect Google Sheets to LinkedIn. And so we thought, okay, this could actually be a really meaningful opportunity for us. But the problem is to develop programmatic pages takes eng work. And again, that can be really time consuming. And so what we decided to do to experiment with this was create the first 100 pages completely manually in Webflow. And when we saw that these pages actually had legs, so we were seeing signal in terms of traffic, in terms of installs, we decided to microscale it and invest by having a part of an engineer's time, leveraging some AI to get another 1,000 pages up. And so I'd say the impact of this more broadly, not just TikTok and programmatic pages, but the impact of experimenting and microscaling has largely been that experimentation is truly the heartbeat of Magical. And it's one of the reasons why we haven't been reliant on a single channel to date. Obviously, there's channels that drive more signups than others. But this focus on experimentation continues to unlock for us new channels to focus on practically every quarter. So key takeaways here, brainstorm and opportunity size. Again, I mentioned this for the other section, but we actually love bringing in the rest of the org to do this. We bring in our engineering team, our product team to help with the brainstorming. And we usually come out with some really awesome experimentation ideas. 2 is focus on rapid experimentation. Try to make it as low or no tech as possible. 3, track all your metrics. Like I said in the TikTok example, guessing is totally fine. You're just looking for signal. And microscale if it succeeds.
Yeah, I love the term microscaling that you all have coined. And I think one of the classic mistakes I see startups making is they overinvest in marketing hiring too early, bringing all these full-time resources on to do all different aspects of marketing. I think your approach has been to keep the marketing team lean. You've got some very talented marketers and do a lot of experimentation. When you see something working, then you microscale it. You augment the teams with external resources, right, which keeps your sort of fixed costs down. You can continue to scale these things in that manner. And then the second thing I think that's really interesting here is TikTok. I think some of you have seen this with other companies recently. Traditionally, consumer social has never been a good avenue for a SaaS productivity startup to find and acquire new users. I think TikTok, for whatever reason, has been very different. We've seen a number of big companies have really leaned into that, leveraged that, and it works for some reason. Don't know why, but it does work, and so it's worked for Magical. One last thing on experimentation. I mean, surely there's been things you've done that haven't worked. So maybe you give one example, because oftentimes we learn more from the experiments that fail than sometimes the experiments that were successful. So can you think of one example of an experiment that you thought would work that just didn't work, what you learned from it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question because there's, as some of you might know, there's more experiments than fail that actually succeed. So one that comes up in recent memory is we actually, and this was the advice of another founder friend in our network, where this experiment worked really successfully for them. We actually decided to invest in outside influencers where they didn't have a strong following at all, but they had budding potential. So meaning we were looking at their content, and maybe they were in customer support or sales or one of our desired personas, and their content looked good. It's just they didn't really have a strong following. And the idea was we would bet on them by paying them a monthly stipend. They would post on behalf of Magical 2 times a day, go live on Magical, on TikTok as well too. And the approach would be, eventually, hopefully they, 1, raise their following, and 2, some of those videos might actually go viral, giving us a boost in installs. And the reason why we actually did this is because influencer marketing can actually be really expensive. So this was an arbitrage opportunity to offset costs and keep our CAC low. What actually ended up happening is, so we tested with, this was actually literally like 2 months ago, we tested with 3 creators in different personas over the course of 8 weeks. And we found that one of them actually started showing a boost in terms of a follower count, some decent impressions on videos, but none of the videos went viral. None of them actually landed in meaningful installs. And when we did the math at the very end, our CAC was actually higher than had we just gone with more proven influencers. So the key takeaway for us was, going after proven influencers, though at first it might seem a little bit more costly, is actually a sure bet versus, the approach that we actually took. So that was a really interesting learning.
Great.
Okay, so you guys made it to the end. Thank you. If you take anything away today, number one, it should be don't be scared of acquisitions early on. Again, these aren't reserved for large, well-funded companies. I'd very much encourage, even if you're early on in your startup journey, just to consider them at least. Two, social proofing has high impact for the effort involved. Truly, I think this is an initiative that we didn't spend months on. It was weeks of our time, and it definitely proved out in terms of impact to effort. Three, it's true, evangelism is truly evergreen, but have your own take on it. Make it creative and make it fun. And four, experiment microscale. You definitely don't need big budgets. There's always ways that you can augment resources so that it can work for you. And last but not least, download Magical. I promise you it'll save you time. Just head over to www.getmagical.com. Thank you. And I think we're going to open the floor now to questions.
Hi, Rosie and David. Thank you so much for your talk. I work in venture now, but I came from a PM background, so share that pipeline with you, David. I'm really curious. So when do you think about when is the right time to bring in growth PMs? Right. So that's part one. And then part two is how do you think about structuring the PM org when there are growth people? Is there a growth team and a core team? Are all PMs growth PMs? Yeah, thank you.
Really good question. We brought in a growth PM really early at Magical. As actually our first PM hire was a growth PM hire. The reason for this is, well, one, we were at a couple of 100,000 users when we brought in our first PM. Before that, our founder and CEO was actually PMing. I'd say the triggers for bringing in a growth PM is, it's really highly dependent on your org and how you think about experimentation. In our case, we, as a fast-growing startup that has experimentation in our heartbeat, really believed that someone with that sort of a skill set would be pretty much like the perfect hire for our PM org. And also because, just like most SaaS companies, the things that we care about most in the funnel are like activation. And then, we care a lot about like the referrals mechanism. Eventually, it became conversion to revenue, and having someone early on actually thinking about that all the time was very critical for us. And then I think you had a second question, but I missed it a little.
Yeah, sorry. So it's about how do you structure the PM team, whether it's both growth and core? Do you even separate? Is every PM a growth PM?
So in our case, we have separated it out. So we have a growth PM team, and then we kind of have like a core team. Growth is, like, their mandate is largely full funnel. So it's everything from activation all the way down to revenue. And then the core team is basically dealing far more with some of our core products like automations, infrastructure, and all that sort of stuff. We also have, a marketing team that actually works really closely with our growth PM team. So in this case, I'd say that there are aspects of some of our experiments that I called out today that were handled by our growth PM team, and others that are handled by marketing as well too. And that handoff is sometimes a little bit dicey. In large part, I'd say that some of the things that I called out in experiment and microscale, like TikTok as an example, that's all handled by like our marketing team. No reliance on EPD. And our growth team's mandate is largely, again, on that funnel. So their first touch point is really largely on activation. But that's not to say that they won't focus on user acquisition. There have been times where, as an example, we're rolling out a Slack app. That's something that's totally handled by our growth PM team.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I'd add one more thing to that. I think, one classic mistake I see startups making is they hire a growth PM before they have product market fit. Mm-hmm. They think they have product market fit, it's just the users aren't growing. And so they get a growth PM to try to fix that. When really the solution is it's just the product's not a really strong product. It doesn't have great product market fit. There's no real customer pull. So I think you have to be at a certain scale. You still should see growth, right, in the customer base and the user base. And then the growth PM can really supercharge that. But I think it's important not to add them until you have those signals of product market fit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie and David. My name is Jade. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Order. We're like Uber Eats for stadium seats. My question is handling Google reviews. I know public perception, especially in the social world today, is really important. You said you were able to jump on a phone with a few of your customers. That generic reply of, we're sorry you had a difficult time, can you reach out to info@domain.com? Did you finesse that in any way to actually get them on an email or on a phone call?
Yeah, actually, in our case, we just proactively reached out to them, and it was largely like focusing first on our top users. So we were focusing on those that we assumed were actually already happy with the app. On the inverse of folks that maybe were not necessarily happy in the app, we would actually get that specifically in through the Chrome Web Store, where we'd see those one-star reviews show up, where someone wasn't really clearly pleased with their experience using Magical. And in those cases, it was, hey, exactly that, like, hey, reach out to hello@getmagical.com and let's jump on a call. And we actually found it fairly effective. We tried to personalize the note as much as possible. Even today, when we're reaching out to our users, especially users that might be pissed off, we really try hard to personalize and keep it light. And we actually find that converts far better than having like some sort of a stock message.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I think users are delighted a lot of times when they get an outreach from a founder or from a company they just negatively review. They weren't expecting that. It can really change, not always, but it can really change the way they think of things, and they're willing to amend the reviews.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, Rosie and David, thanks for a great workshop. My name is Serge Amouzou. I'm the CEO and founder of Datatrix, which is an AI-powered client advisory software for accountants and bookkeepers. We're at this interesting intersection where we just came out of beta about a month ago, and we're working with a partner to activate our email marketing here in the US and in Canada. And we think, once we activate this campaign, which is actually happening next week, we're going to have an inflood of, MQLs, right? Marketing qualified leads, et cetera. And we're still a super small team. There's 3 of us right now. And part of me is already thinking, there's no way I can handle all those emails coming in. And so we're starting to brainstorm, who do we bring on? Do we bring on an account executive, like a sales engineer? And then we kind of are arriving at the point where maybe it could be a product advocate, right? So someone who can quickly respond to this email, get customers on board. And so I'm interested in your thoughts on who this potential new hire should be to help with that inflow that we think it's inbound that should be happening.
It's a great question. I'm going to have a very biased response, and I'm very curious about David's response here. So my rule on hiring is absolutely never hire until you absolutely need it. So basically, like, I wouldn't proactively hire it. I'd actually wait until you get all that inbound, and then I'd wait to see if that inbound actually converts into real revenue.
Yeah.
And I would try to then close those deals on your own, and then I would consider hiring. I think the problem with bringing on a sales hire really early is they need a repeatable process. So basically, if you prematurely hire a salesperson and you haven't, I actually don't know the full background of, your startup. Maybe you have already sold to a level where there is a process in place, but assuming you haven't.
Sure. So it's self-serve, right? So product growth, and that's why we're thinking having an account executive is probably not the great idea. Like I said, we don't need to hop on calls for demos, right? Again, it's self-serve.
Yeah. Right. So in this case, I would still largely say it sounds like you are kind of going after enterprise because these are
B2B,
MQLs. These are MQLs. Yeah, in that case, my bias would probably be try to do as much of it on your own for as long as possible, figure out a repeatable process, and then back into the attributes you need, and then hire according to that. It could be an SDR, it could be an AE, it could be a product advocate. I think you're thinking about it the right way, but I would probably try to do as much of it on your own. I do the same thing, by the way, like where I think of my role as COO at Magical as start a function, and then eventually when I figure it out and too much is overflowing on my plate, I fire myself and I hire the right person for it that can do it way better than me. So I don't know if that's the right answer. I'd be very curious to hear what David said.
I totally agree with that. I also think be cautious about ramping up top of funnel too soon. You really want to make sure the funnel's performing. And so I don't like the approach of big bang launches. I think you should start small. So you shouldn't need to hire internally to staff the number of MQLs coming in. You should see if those convert, turn into customers that end up retaining. If they are, then you can gradually start to ramp that up and really start to speed it, and then you can start to add more folks. But a lot of startups, I think, are just so focused on generating top of funnel, and they lose so much, and you're kind of burning, time, resources, generating that top of funnel when the things aren't quite there yet.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Rosita, David. My name is Lei Zhao. I'm currently develop a personal CRM to help people better connect it with their private knowledge of their network and on their public network. And we are still in really early stage of my team. And me and my co-founder, we are both technical. So one of the questions I have is how the marketing and sales could help team finding better product market fit. And that would be my first question.
Is how marketing and sales could help find product market fit with a highly technical team?
Yeah.
Got it. So I don't have a ton of knowledge on your product and what you guys totally do, but I'd say that product market fit is, again, it's a very binary answer in my case. It's like ultimately the job of the founders. And the reason for that is I'm just a big believer that if we can't do it, and obviously, of course, there's always going to be things that I suck at versus others. Like I'm pretty good at data, but I hired this rock star data scientist, and she's like far better than me. But if I can't figure it out, specifically something as big as product market fit, I don't think I could ever like outsource that to a hire. So my thinking here would be like try to get as much coaching as possible from like marketers and salespeople in your network. And I'd say that like, I imagine you're starting a company, you have like incredible growth mindset. So you will be able to pick up those skills and flex those muscles. I was our first marketer, even though I have no skills in marketing, until we hired our rockstar head of marketing. And you should be able to, through your network, get that coaching so that you can, you can build at least a bit of go-to-market muscle. I'd be curious about.
Yeah, I would say most of our most successful startups, SaaS startups, had technical founders, right? And I think one thing that's really clear is, you should be responsible for product market fit, which means spending a lot of time with customers, with end users, intimately understanding the landscape, the user problem, because you're, with finding product market fit, you're trying to find signal, very faint signal in a lot of noise. So you don't want levels of indirection between you and between the customers, right? So at that stage, and then once you have product market fit, I think that's the time to start to supplement your team and bring in other folks.
Mm-hmm. All right. My next question is regarding the product-led growth, and what's your advice on any pitfall you have saw in the product-led growth, and we could set up upfront at the company so that we could leverage product-led growth down the road.
Do you have a thought on this, David?
Yeah, I think you have to be intentional about whether you want a product-led growth company or whether you want more of an enterprise top-down company. It's important to make those decisions at the outset. And if it's going to be product-led growth, then it's really just optimizing that end user experience, leveraging growth channels we talked about today, because Magical is very much a product-led growth company. But it all comes back to, I think for product-led growth to work, you have to have very strong end user pull, which isn't just usage, it's actually user love. So users really love, that's why Magical has been so successful with referral programs, because users like the product so much, they're willing to tell their colleagues about it, or they tell their people at other companies about it, right? And that leads to a flywheel of growth. Until you have that, that's what you have to optimize for.
All right. Okay, thank you very much.
Hello, thank you very much for your talks. It's been very useful. I'd like to know how you come up with pricing tiers. Like what drive you toward that kind of tiering levels?
Yeah. This is a great question.
Because this is what I see. You have great reviews, and you have a free tier forever, right? And I think you could use a time-based trial for $1 a month, let's say, whatever.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Actually, this is an expertise area for both David and I. So I'm sure we could talk about this for a very long time. In my past life, I ran monetization over at Atlassian. I'd say that first off, you have to figure out what's best for your startup. Is it freemium? Is it free trials? In Magical's case, we've gone after freemium specifically, but we're still continuing to experiment. And then in terms of determining what your paywalls actually are, it's really challenging to actually do that. And I'd say as founders, you probably have the best intuition of what those paywalls should be. Obviously, you want something that is a cap that users will hit that will force an upgrade, but you want something that is also generous enough so that they can develop the right behavior on the product and ideally continue using the product. And finding that happy medium is usually really, really hard. I'd say that there are like some best practices for pricing plans. Like you probably want at most, as a self-serve PLG business, like at most 3 plans to select from, because anything more than that is cognitive overload. You probably want to keep your pricing in like low double digits because you want someone to not think and swipe their credit card. So you really want to make it easy and frictionless to actually purchase the plan as well too. Those are some of my best practices, but in terms of coming up with free for Magical, it did require a lot of chatting with customers, brainstorming potential paywalls, chatting with customers, getting their reaction, running willingness to pay studies, both quals, in certain cases quants as well too, and then coming up with kind of like a recommendation of what we see fit, and then always iterating and experimenting. David, you probably have a lot on this.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think it's highly situational. If you want to chat afterwards, we can talk. We're getting the red blinking.
Got it.
Warning.
Thank you very much.
So.
Thank you so much, Mario. One question. You mentioned you scaled to thousands of landing pages that had questions using AI. What were some of those tools that you guys used that were able to help you scale so quickly?
Yeah, it's a really good question. To be completely honest, I think part of it is actually, I actually don't know the name of the tool that we used. Maybe if you could catch me afterwards, I can follow up with you. But I know we did use an AI tool to help write some of the narratives on the actual pages itself. And we put it then through review with our content writer just to actually make sure it stood up and had some efficacy. And then on actually launching the programmatic pages, we did explore a couple of external tools, and there are some companies now built around programmatic because it's become such a popular concept. But in the end, we couldn't find anything that was really meaningful. So I think we just set up a CSM within CMS, within Webflow. And our engineering team just did their magic in terms of hooking it up. But for that specific AI writing tool that we used, I'll just find me afterwards and I can follow up with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
you all.